Hi, I'm Nick, and this is How to Play Warcry. Warcry is a fast-paced game of brutal skirmish combat, where warbands clash in search of plunder and eternal glory. In the feral wilderness of the Gnarlwood, blood is spilled, bones are shattered, and legends are forged. You'll choose your warband, claim victory through tactics, skill, and luck, and grow in power over the course of an epic campaign. It's pretty cool. Warcry is super simple to play. First, you'll need a warband. Then, you'll need your terrain, your rules and cards, and of course, an opponent. First up, let's take a look at the fighter cards. You won't be winning any battles without mustering your mighty warriors. The rules for every fighter in Warcry are recorded on their fighter cards. This lets you know how tough and how fast they are, as well as what they're armed with. Warcry uses a system of rune marks and symbols. So on this Ruinator Alpha's fighter card, we've got the faction rune mark, in this case the Horns of Hashut, their move characteristic, their toughness characteristic, and how many wounds that fighter has. They'll also have a points value. You'll use this when you're assembling your warband before battle. Normally, in a game of Warcry, you have 1,000 points to spend on fighters. You need one leader, and the rest is up to you, but choose carefully. These are the fighters' weapons, and we'll talk about how they work later on. Last of all, we've got a set of additional rune marks on the fighter's card. In this case, the Ruinator Alpha has the Hero, Warrior, and Brute rune marks. This might change what abilities a fighter can use or how they move. Once you've mustered your warband for battle, just gather the fighter cards you need and split your fighters into 3 equal groups, called the Dagger, the Shield, and the Hammer. Then you'll be ready to play. We'll be pitting the merciless and relentless warriors of the Horns of Hashut against the deranged plague spreaders of the Rotmire Creed. So now we need to set up our game. You'll find terrain and a board to play on inside your core set. Here's some I prepared earlier. You don't need much space to play Warcry. You can easily squeeze in a battle on your coffee table. Setting up a battle plan is super easy too. Battles are randomly generated with thousands of possible combinations by drawing a card from 4 decks: Terrain, Deployment, Victory, and Twist. The Terrain deck tells you how to set up your battlefield. Sometimes predatory trees might be scattered across the board, giving our fighters lots of cover to sneak around, or we might find a tangle of trees in the middle of the board. The Deployment deck tells you how to set up the fighters in your 3 battle groups. Are you launching a flanking assault on a surrounded enemy, already within striking distance from the first turn? Or perhaps you're just lining up for a good old-fashioned pitch battle. The Victory deck tells you how to win. Each card has a set of victory conditions. You might have to take objectives, assassinate the enemy leader, or claim some treasure. Finally, the Twist deck adds a new special rule to your battle. Your battlefield might be overrun by deadly creatures, deluged with sudden weather, or even under the influence of the Chaos Gods themselves. Once we've drawn all 4 cards, we'll know how to set up our game, and we can get started. So we've got our warbands, we've generated our battle plan, and now it's time to fight. Warcry is broken up into battle rounds, each of which is split into 3 phases: the initiative phase, the reserve phase, and the combat phase. For our first battle, we'll be giving the reserves phase a miss, but you can learn more about it in the Warcry core book. The first thing we do in the initiative phase is determine initiative to see who's going to go first in the first battle round. We do this by rolling 6 dice. Make sure to keep a hold of any dice that roll the same number. They'll be very handy later on. Here we've got 2 3s, that's a double, and 3 5s, that's a triple. If we rolled 4 of the same number, we'd have a quad. We put these aside for now. The player with the most singles, that's dice without the same score as any other, has the initiative, meaning they get to activate a fighter first. Which brings us to the combat phase. This is where things get bloody. In the combat phase, each player takes it in turns to activate a fighter. Each time you activate a fighter, you can take 2 actions out of a list of 4: move, attack, disengage, and wait. Fighters can move across the battlefield at different speeds. To move, find out how fast your fighter is on their card by checking under this symbol. You can move that far in inches. When you move a fighter, you can scale walls, leap gaps, or clamber low obstacles with total freedom. Most battles in Warcry, of course, involve slaying your foes, so let's take a look at how we attack. To attack your enemies, first choose a weapon on your fighter card. Some fighters have more than one weapon. This Demolisher from the Horns of Hashut has a Flame Hurler, which they can use to burn their enemies at range, or their fists, which they can use when they're up close and personal. Of course, we'll go with the Flame Hurler. Next, choose an enemy fighter in range of that weapon. We'll pick this Mirefolk Outcast. To see how much damage we do, roll a number of dice equal to the weapon's attack characteristic. Then, compare the weapon's strength to the enemy's toughness. As this weapon's strength is greater than the enemy fighter's toughness, any roll of a 3 or more on those dice has succeeded. Whatever your weapon's strength or your enemy's toughness, a roll of 6 is always a critical hit, which deals extra damage. Here we've got a miss, a hit, and a critical hit. Hits deal damage equal to the first number, while critical hits deal damage equal to the second number. That means we've dealt 6 damage. After allocating this to the Mirefolk Outcast, they've only got 4 wounds left, so another attack could take them out for good. Sometimes it's better to run and fight another day. You can't move normally when you're within 1 inch of an enemy. Instead, use a fighter's action to disengage and move 3 inches to escape from combat. This move must take them more than an inch away from all other enemies, and can't be used to do any fancy stuff like climbing, jumping, or flying. Fighters also have the option to wait. If this is your fighter's second action, well, nothing happens, it simply passes your turn. But if it's your fighter's first action, you get a delay instead. Your activation ends, but the fighter who waited can be activated later in the round for a single action. It's perfect if you want to see what your enemy has planned before you make a play. Every warband can use these actions, but they also all have some unique tricks up their sleeves. That's their abilities. Abilities are special plays your warband can use to turn the tide of the battle. As well as a set of universal abilities, each warband has their own unique tricks of the trade. To use these abilities, we'll need those dice we rolled during the initiative step earlier. Remember those doubles, triples, and quads we mentioned? Well, the more dice you use, the more powerful the ability. For example, we could spend our double to use the Merciless Cruelty ability, which lets us finish off wounded fighters. Alternatively, we could spend our triple on a more powerful ability. Ash Bomb, for example, can be used to weaken stubborn enemies before you strike that killing blow. To use it, we'll need to pick a fighter with a matching rune mark, our Ruinator Alpha, for example. You don't get to keep your doubles, triples, and quads in between turns, so make sure you use them while you still have them. We're almost ready to play Warcry. There are just a couple more things to cover. Firstly, reactions. These are things a fighter can do during the enemy fighter's activation. There are 3 universal reactions that can be made by any fighter. If you're about to get stabbed, you can counter your foe's strikes. About to get shot down? Well, it's time to take cover. Is the enemy trying to run away, the coward? Strike them down before they get the chance. In addition to these universal reactions, each warband has their own bespoke reactions to call upon. Each time a fighter makes a reaction, it uses up one of their actions for that battle round, so if you've already activated a fighter, they can't react. Unless, of course, you chose to wait earlier on. Lastly, there are the wild dice. Every turn you'll receive one special dice called a wild dice. This can be used to represent any roll you want during the initiative step, letting you upgrade a single into a double into a triple, or a triple into a quad. You can also use them to seize the initiative by adding an extra single to your pool of dice. Wild dice stick around between turns, but can only be used once, so choose wisely. And that's it! You're all set to try your first game of Warcry. If you want to know more, check out the Warcry website for more tactics, tips, and tricks, and I'll see you on the battlefield.